The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. But what happens when something from beyond the stars, something that answers to different gods and different laws, tears through the fabric of space itself and crashes into a world where darkness reigns supreme? The Bifrost should have been stable. Thor Odinson, crowned prince of Asgard and god of thunder, had traveled the Rainbow Bridge countless times, moving between the Nine Realms with the ease of immortal familiarity. But the battle against the Dark Elves had damaged more than just Asgard's defenses. It had fractured something fundamental in the cosmic pathways themselves. As Thor pursued a fleeing enemy through the Bifrost's kaleidoscopic tunnel, reality simply broke. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced in 1,500 years of life. The rainbow corridor shattered like glass around him, and Thor found himself tumbling through absolute void. Not the cold emptiness of space he knew, but something else entirely. A place between places, a gap in existence itself. When he emerged, it was not into the green fields of Vanaheim or the frozen wastes of Jotunheim. Thor crashed onto volcanic rock with enough force to crater the obsidian surface. Lava geysers erupted around him, painting the sky in shades of crimson and amber. The heat was tremendous, enough to vaporize a mortal human instantly. But to an Asgardian, it was merely uncomfortable. He rose slowly, Mjolnir still gripped firmly in his right hand, and surveyed his surroundings with a warrior's practiced eye. Rivers of molten rock carved glowing channels through black stone. The air shimmered with thermic distortion, and ash fell like snow from a sky choked with volcanic clouds. In the distance, mountains of fire belched smoke toward the heavens. But what drew Thor's attention, what made his warrior's instinct flare with warning, was the structure rising from the hellscape before him. A fortress. Black as midnight and angular in its architecture, it jutted from the volcanic plain like a dagger thrust into the planet's heart. Its design spoke of purpose and power, of someone who had chosen this world of fire as their domain. Windows glowed with internal light, and though Thor could see no banners or identifying marks, he sensed something about the place that made his grip tighten on Mjolnir's leather-wrapped handle. This was not Asgard. This was not any of the Nine Realms. "By Odin's beard," Thor muttered, his voice nearly lost in the roar of nearby lava flows, "where has the Bifrost brought me?" He extended his awareness, searching for the familiar sensation of Heimdall's gaze, the all-seeing guardian who watched over Asgard's warriors across the realms. Nothing. The connection was simply absent, not blocked, not severed, but as if it had never existed at all. Thor was truly alone in a way he'd rarely experienced. A strange energy permeated this place. Not the magic of Asgard, not the cosmic forces Thor had encountered in his travels, but something else. It felt alive, aware, and it seemed to flow through everything. The rock, the air, even the fire itself. It reminded him vaguely of the energy he'd sensed in Midgard's most mystical places, but magnified 1,000-fold and fundamentally different in character. Thor made his decision quickly. Standing on volcanic rock would yield no answers. If intelligent beings dwelled in that fortress, they might know where he was and how he might return home. And if they proved hostile, well, Thor had faced worse odds than one fortress full of unknown enemies. He raised Mjolnir and felt the familiar surge of power as the enchanted hammer responded to his will. Lightning crackled around him, arcing between his armor and the weapon, and then he was airborne, rocketing toward the dark fortress at speeds that turned the landscape into a blur of red and black. As he approached, Thor noticed details that made his warrior's instinct sharpen further. The fortress was defended. Turrets tracked his approach with mechanical precision, and he could see armored figures moving along the battlements. But they moved with an oddness, a uniformity that suggested either elite training or something else entirely. He was 500 meters from the fortress walls when the first energy bolt screamed toward him. Thor twisted in midair, and the bolts, strange red lances of light unlike any weapon he'd seen, passed harmlessly by. More followed, filling the air with deadly light. He deflected one with Mjolnir, the impact sending sparks cascading, then dove toward the source of the fire. The armored figures were humanoid, but their armor was white, segmented, and covered their entire bodies, including their faces. They wielded rifles that fired the red energy bolts, and they moved with coordinated precision that spoke of military discipline. But there was something hollow about them, as if they were more machine than man. Thor had no wish to kill defenders who might simply be protecting their home from what appeared to be an attacker. He landed hard on the fortress wall, the impact cracking stone, and swept Mjolnir in a wide arc that sent 3 of the white-armored soldiers tumbling, alive but unconscious, to the courtyard below. "I mean you no harm," Thor shouted over the sounds of battle. "I seek only knowledge of where." The air itself seemed to darken. Thor's words died as he felt it, a presence approaching that dwarfed the strange energy permeating this world. It was power, yes, but power wrapped in something cold and terrible. It felt like standing in the shadow of death itself. From within the fortress, a figure emerged. He was tall, clad entirely in black armor that seemed to drink in the surrounding light. A cape flowed behind him like pooled shadow, but it was the mask that captured Thor's attention. A black helmet with angular features, and a respirator that hissed with each breath, mechanical and rhythmic. Red lenses stared at Thor with an intensity that needed no eyes to convey. The figure raised one black-gloved hand, and Thor felt the strange energy of this place surge. Invisible force gripped him, not his body, but something deeper, as if the very air had become solid around him. Thor recognized telekinesis, though he'd never felt it wielded with such precision and power. "You are not of this galaxy," the figure said. His voice was deep, mechanically distorted by the mask, and carried absolute authority. "Explain your presence on Mustafar or be destroyed." Thor set his feet against the invisible pressure, muscles hardening with Asgardian strength. Mjolnir hummed with building power in his grip. He met those red lenses with eyes that crackled with gathering lightning. "I am Thor Odinson of Asgard," he declared, his voice carrying across the fortress with godly resonance, "and I kneel before no one." If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you.
The telekinetic pressure increased. Lesser beings would have been crushed instantly, bones pulverized and organs ruptured by the sheer force. But Thor was Asgardian son of Odin, brother to Loki, heir to a throne that had ruled for millennia. His biology was fundamentally different from the soft mortals of Midgard, his cellular structure enhanced by magic and divine heritage. He pushed back. Lightning erupted from Thor's body in a corona of crackling energy, disrupting the invisible grip with electromagnetic interference. The bolts earthed themselves through the fortress walls, leaving scorch marks on black stone. Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir spinning in his hand, building momentum. The black-armored figure, this apparent lord of the fortress, didn't retreat. Instead, he extended both hands, and the strange energy that permeated this world coalesced into visible force. Debris from the courtyard, chunks of stone, pieces of equipment, even the unconscious forms of the white-armored soldiers tore free from the ground and hurtled toward Thor like projectiles from a siege engine. Thor swung Mjolnir in a devastating arc. The enchanted hammer, forged in the heart of a dying star and inscribed with Odin's own magic, met the telekinetically hurled debris with overwhelming force. Stone shattered into powder, metal crumpled and flew aside. The unconscious soldiers were gently deflected by precisely controlled hammer strikes that sent them tumbling safely to the ground rather than allowing them to be used as weapons. "Impressive," the dark figure acknowledged, his mechanical breathing steady and unhurried. "You possess strength beyond any being I have encountered, but strength alone will not save you from the power of the dark side." He thrust one hand forward, and lightning, but not Thor's lightning, exploded from his fingertips. It was purple-white, crackling with malevolent energy, and it carried a sensation of pure hatred that Thor could feel even before it struck him. The force lightning hit Thor square in the chest, and for the first time since arriving on this world of fire, the god of thunder felt pain. It was not the lightning itself. Thor had weathered storms that would have leveled cities, had channeled enough electricity to power Asgard's defenses for years. This was different. This energy carried something within it, something that sought not just to damage the body but to assault the very spirit. It was anger and suffering made manifest, and it burned in ways that had nothing to do with heat. Thor gritted his teeth and pushed through it. His Asgardian physiology adapted, his inherent resistance to energy damage asserting itself. More importantly, his own connection to lightning, not technological or learned, but fundamental to his divine nature, allowed him to partially ground the attack through his body and into Mjolnir. A valiant attempt, Thor growled, advancing step by step against the onslaught of force lightning. But I am the god of thunder. Lightning is my servant, not my master. He raised Mjolnir high, and the volcanic sky responded. True lightning, the kind born of storm clouds and atmospheric charge, answered Thor's call. It struck down from the ash-choked heavens in a pillar of white-blue fury that dwarfed the dark figure's purple lightning, meeting it in a collision of energies that lit up Mustafar's perpetual twilight like a newborn sun. The courtyard exploded. Stone vaporized. Metal melted. The shockwave sent the remaining white-armored soldiers flying like leaves in a hurricane. When the light faded and the thunder's echo rolled across the lava plains, both warriors stood their ground. Thor's cape smoldered and his armor bore scorch marks, but his eyes blazed with undiminished determination. The dark figure's cloak was singed, smoke rising from his armor's joints, but he stood with the immovable presence of a mountain. For a long moment, they assessed each other. Warriors recognized warriors, regardless of the gulf between their origins. "You withstand the force lightning," the dark figure said, and there was something in his mechanical voice, not quite respect but acknowledgement. "That is unexpected. Most beings are reduced to screaming wrecks within seconds." "Most beings are not gods," Thor replied, rolling his shoulders and feeling his Asgardian healing already beginning to repair the damage. "And you, lord of this fortress, possess power unlike any I've encountered in my travels. What manner of sorcery do you wield?" "It is not sorcery." The figure lowered his hands, though his stance remained that of a warrior ready to resume combat at an instant's notice. "It is the Force, the energy that flows through all living things in this galaxy. I am Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith and servant of the Galactic Empire. You claim to be a god, yet I sense no Force presence from you. You are an anomaly, an impossibility." "Thor Odinson is no anomaly where I come from," Thor said, though he kept Mjolnir ready. This Vader was dangerous, perhaps as dangerous as any foe Thor had faced, save his brother Loki or the Dark Elves who had threatened all of Asgard. "I am Prince of my realm and defender of 9 worlds. The Bifrost brought me here by accident, through some rift I do not yet understand. I seek only knowledge of where I am and how I might return home." Vader was silent for a moment, his mechanical breathing the only sound save the distant roar of lava flows. Thor could sense him thinking, calculating, weighing options with the precision of a military strategist. "You speak of realms and bridges between worlds," Vader said finally. "Such concepts exist in myths and ancient Force philosophy, but the hyperspace lanes are the only proven method of traveling between star systems. If you truly arrived here through some other means..." He paused, and Thor sensed the Dark Lord's attention sharpening. "The Emperor will wish to study this phenomenon. You will accompany me to Coruscant." It was not a request. "I take orders from no one save my father, the All-Father Odin," Thor stated flatly. "If this Emperor of yours wishes to speak with me, he may do so as one ruler to another with respect and diplomacy. The Emperor does not negotiate with anomalies," Vader replied, his tone dropping to something even colder. "He commands. You will comply, or you will be destroyed. There is no third option." Thor's eyes narrowed. He dealt with tyrants before, beings who believed their power gave them the right to dictate terms to others. Asgard had gone to war over such presumptions more than once in its long history. "Then we have a problem," Thor said quietly, lightning beginning to crackle around him once more. "For I will not be commanded like some thrall. If you wish to continue this battle, Vader, then let us continue it. But know this, I have fought frost giants and dark elves, fire demons and stone men. I have battled my way through the armies of Jotunheim and stood against the destroyer itself. You are formidable, perhaps the most formidable opponent I've faced, but I will not yield." Vader's hand moved to his belt, and there was a snap hiss as something ignited. A blade, no, not a blade, but a beam of crimson energy that hummed with barely contained power. A lightsaber, though Thor did not know the term. He only knew it radiated danger in a way that made his warrior's instinct flare with warning. "So be it," Vader said, and his lightsaber came up in a guard position that spoke of decades of deadly expertise. Thor spun Mjolnir, building momentum, feeling the hammer's enchantments sing in harmony with his own divine power. Storm clouds were gathering overhead, drawn by his presence and anger. The volcanic heat of Mustafar met the fury of Asgardian thunder, and the air itself trembled with the promise of violence. They moved simultaneously.
The collision of Mjolnir and lightsaber sent a shockwave rolling across Mustafar's volcanic plains that shattered windows in Vader's fortress and triggered sympathetic eruptions in nearby lava flows. The sound was catastrophic, the ring of enchanted Uru metal meeting a blade of pure plasma contained by magnetic fields and the Force itself. Thor had expected the red energy blade to be severed or dissipated by Mjolnir's strike. Instead, it held, the containment field stabilizing against the hammer's impact through Vader's will and the lightsaber's unique construction. Sparks cascaded where weapon met weapon, and both warriors strained against each other with strength that transcended mortal limits. Vader's physical power was immense, far beyond what his aging, damaged body should have been capable of. The Force flowed through his cybernetic limbs, enhancing synthetic muscle and servo motors to levels that could crush Durasteel with bare hands. He'd killed Jedi Masters with his physical might alone, overwhelmed trained Force users through sheer aggressive power. But Thor was Asgardian. His strength was measured not in hundreds of kilograms, but in the capacity to trade blows with the Hulk, to restrain the Destroyer, to hold back the Bifrost itself when it threatened to tear realms apart. When he pushed against Vader's blade, the Dark Lord actually slid backward, boots carving furrows in volcanic stone. Vader didn't waste energy fighting the superior strength. He redirected it using Von V's principle of turning an opponent's power against them. The lightsaber disengaged from the bind, spinning in a strike pattern too fast for human eyes to follow, but Thor's eyes were not human. He tracked the red blade's arc and met it with Mjolnir in a series of blocks and parries that rang out like a blacksmith's hammer on an anvil. The courtyard became a battlefield worthy of legend. Thor's strikes carried enough force to shatter pillars and crack foundations. Vader's counters were surgical in their precision. Each lightsaber slash aimed at joints, gaps in armor, any vulnerability that might present itself. When Thor swung Mjolnir in a devastating overhead strike, Vader sidestepped with Force-enhanced speed and sent a telekinetic blast that slammed the God of Thunder into the fortress wall hard enough to leave a Thor-shaped crater. Thor exploded out of the impact site, showering the courtyard with debris, and hurled Mjolnir with all his strength. The hammer became a missile, crossing the distance to Vader in a fraction of a second, while lightning coiled around its spinning form. Vader raised his free hand and caught the hammer with the Force. It was a demonstration of telekinetic power that would have awed any Jedi who witnessed it. Mjolnir hung in midair, still spinning, still crackling with electricity, held in place by pure Force will. The strain was visible in Vader's stance, in the way his breathing increased through the respirator, but he held it. "Your weapon is formidable," Vader said, his mechanical voice carrying effort for the first time. "But it is merely an object, and all objects can be controlled through the Force." Thor extended his hand, and Mjolnir jerked in the air, caught between two wills. The hammer trembled, electricity arcing wildly from its surface as divine enchantment warred with Force telekinesis. Neither power could fully claim dominance. Odin's spell declared that only the worthy could lift Mjolnir, but Vader wasn't lifting it, merely holding it in place through direct force application. It was a stalemate of philosophies made manifest. "You understand nothing of Mjolnir," Thor growled, and he pulled with all his divine connection to the weapon. The hammer shot back to his hand like it was attached by an invisible cord, breaking Vader's grip so suddenly that the Dark Lord actually staggered. Thor spun and brought Mjolnir around in a strike aimed at Vader's center mass. The Dark Lord brought his lightsaber up to block, but the impact was too powerful to fully absorb. Vader was sent flying, crashing through one of the fortress's outer walls in an explosion of stone and durasteel. The God of Thunder pursued without hesitation, leaping through the gap with Mjolnir raised high. He found himself in what appeared to be some kind of meditation chamber, a cylindrical room dominated by a raised platform and strange technological equipment. Vader was already rising from the wreckage, lightsaber reigniting with its characteristic snap hiss. "You fight well for a being who claims divinity," Vader said, circling slowly. His armor was dented, and Thor could see sparks coming from one shoulder joint where the impact had damaged internal systems. But the Dark Lord's movements were still fluid, still dangerous. "But you bleed, you can be hurt, that makes you mortal, not a god." "Gods bleed when facing worthy opponents," Thor replied, wiping a trickle of blood from his split lip. Force lightning had found flesh despite his armor during their earlier exchange. The question is whether you are such an opponent or merely another tyrant who will fall to Asgardian justice. Vader's response was to assault Thor with a renewed barrage of force lightning, but this time the Dark Lord didn't simply project it from his hands. He channeled it through the meditation chamber itself, using the dark side nexus that permeated Mustafar to amplify the attack. Lightning erupted from walls, floor, and ceiling simultaneously, turning the room into a cage of purple-white agony. Thor roared and released his own power. True lightning, stormborn and divine, exploded from his body in all directions, meeting Vader's force lightning in a collision that overloaded the chamber's systems. Lights exploded, equipment melted, and cracks spiderwebbed across the walls as two fundamentally different forms of electrical power warred for supremacy. Through the corona of competing lightning, Thor charged. He couldn't see Vader through the blinding light, but he trusted his warrior's instincts, his centuries of combat experience. Mjolnir led the way, its enchantments parting the energy storm like a ship's prow cutting through waves. He found Vader waiting, lightsaber in a guard position that showed no fear despite the maelstrom around them. Their weapons met again, and this time there was no testing, no probing for weakness. It was pure aggression, both warriors committing fully to the attack. Thor's fighting style was aggressive, powerful, built on strength and the momentum of Mjolnir's swings. Vader's form, V-Gem, so was equally aggressive, built on dominating an opponent through strength and counterattacks. The result was a collision of philosophies that devastated everything around them. The meditation chamber didn't survive. Walls collapsed, the ceiling fell. Within seconds, the entire section of the fortress was coming down around them, and still they fought. They crashed through floors, their battle taking them deeper into the fortress's structure. Stormtroopers and Imperial personnel fled before them, wisely choosing survival over attempting to intervene. They emerged onto a balcony overlooking one of Mustafar's lava rivers, and the heat hit them like a physical wall. The red-orange glow painted their armor in infernal shades. Steam and ash filled the air, making each breath taste of sulfur and fire. Thor brought Mjolnir down in an overhead strike that Vader caught with his lightsaber in a two-handed block. They strained against each other, neither giving ground, both warriors' power fully committed to overwhelming the other. The balcony cracked beneath their feet. Stone groaned. Metal screamed. And in that moment of locked weapons and matched strength, their eyes met Thor's blue and blazing with righteous fury. Vader's hidden behind crimson lenses, but somehow conveying the weight of terrible experience. "You could have served the Empire," Vader said through the mechanical hiss of his respirator. "With your power, we could have brought order to 1,000 worlds." "I serve no empire built on fear," Thor replied, his voice steady despite the strain. "I have seen what becomes of such regimes. They crumble, inevitably, beneath the weight of their own cruelty." "Then you are a fool," Vader stated coldly. "And fools die." He released the lightsaber bind and simultaneously unleashed a force push of tremendous power. Thor was thrown backward off the balcony, over the railing, and toward the lava river 20 meters below. The heat was intense enough to vaporize organic matter on contact, and even Asgardian durability had limits. Thor spun Mjolnir and used it to arrest his fall, the hammer pulling him sideways and up in defiance of gravity. He arced back toward the balcony where Vader stood, building speed, lightning trailing behind him like a comet's tail. Vader met the charge with both hands extended, channeling the dark side in its purest, most destructive form. The Force itself became a weapon, invisible, inexorable pressure that sought to halt Thor's flight, to crush him, to snuff out this anomaly that threatened the natural order of the galaxy. The two forces met in the air, above the lava river divine lightning and Sith darkness, Asgardian strength and Force mastery. The collision created a sphere of energy that hung suspended for a heartbeat, perfectly balanced between opposing powers. Then it detonated. The explosion sent both warriors flying in opposite directions. Thor crashed into the far bank of the lava river, his impact creating a crater that immediately began filling with molten rock. Vader was hurled back into his fortress, smashing through the balcony railing and coming to rest amid the wreckage of what had once been his personal quarters. For a moment, there was silence save for the ever-present roar of Mustafar's volcanic fury and the hiss of Vader's respirator. Smoke rose from both impact sites. The lava river churned, agitated by the energies that had been released above it. Thor rose first. His armor was scorched black in places, the cape reduced to tattered remnants. Blood ran from a cut above his eye, and his movements were slower than before, not injured precisely, but feeling the accumulation of damage even his Asgardian physiology couldn't instantly heal. He climbed from the crater, boots crunching on cooling volcanic glass, and looked across the river to where Vader's fortress loomed. This battle could continue. Thor knew he had the strength to press the attack, to bring this fortress down around the Dark Lord's ears if necessary. But something gave him pause, a warrior's intuition honed over 15 centuries of combat. Vader wasn't his true enemy. This empire the Dark Lord served might be tyrannical, but Thor had arrived uninvited on their world, had defeated their guards, had damaged their fortress. From a certain perspective, Vader's response had been entirely justified. Thor had dealt with enough diplomatic incidents between the Nine Realms to recognize when pride and duty were driving a conflict more than actual enmity. More importantly, continuing this battle served no purpose. Thor needed information where he was, how to return to Asgard, what had happened to the Bifrost. Killing or defeating Vader wouldn't provide those answers. It would only make enemies of an empire whose resources and knowledge he might need. Across the lava river, Vader emerged from the wreckage of his quarters. His armor was dented, his cape torn, and sparks flickered from damaged systems in his life support. But he stood with undiminished presence, lightsaber reigniting in his hand. The Dark Lord assessed Thor with those emotionless red lenses, and Thor sensed the same calculation occurring in his opponent's mind. They had fought to a stalemate. Neither could easily overcome the other. Continuing would only result in further destruction and potentially the death of one or both, an outcome that served neither of their interests. "Enough," Thor called across the distance, his voice carrying over the lava's roar. He lowered Mjolnir, not setting it aside, but taking it out of an active attack position. "This battle proves nothing except that we are evenly matched. I did not come to your world seeking conflict, Lord Vader. I came by accident, and I wish only to understand where I am and how I might return home." Vader didn't lower his lightsaber immediately. The red blade hummed in his grip, ready to continue the fight if Thor showed any sign of treachery. But after a long moment, he deactivated it with a snap hiss that seemed to echo with finality. "Your power is considerable," Vader admitted, the mechanical distortion of his voice making it impossible to read emotion, but the words themselves carrying weight. "You withstood force lightning that has killed Jedi Masters. You matched me in combat, something few in this galaxy can claim. You are either what you say you are, or the most sophisticated deception I have encountered." "I am Thor, son of Odin," Thor repeated, this time without the challenge in his tone. "In my realm, I am known as the God of Thunder. Though I understand such claims might seem strange to you, I wield Mjolnir, forged in the heart of a dying star and enchanted by my father to answer only to the worthy. I protect the 9 realms from threats both external and internal, and I find myself far from home, in a place I do not recognize, facing warriors and powers I have never encountered." Vader was silent, his mechanical breathing the only sound from his side of the river. Thor could sense the Dark Lord thinking, processing, evaluating. Finally, Vader spoke. "You claim to be from another realm entirely, not another planet or system within this galaxy, but something beyond it. Such claims border on impossibility, yet you demonstrate abilities inconsistent with any known Force tradition. You possess no midi-chlorian presence that I can sense, yet you command lightning as if it were an extension of your will. You wield a weapon that resists Force manipulation through unknown means, and you arrived here through no hyperspace lane or known method of travel. Then you believe me?" Thor asked, not quite allowing hope to enter his voice, but feeling a glimmer of it nonetheless. "I believe you are an anomaly that requires explanation," Vader corrected. "Whether that explanation aligns with your claims remains to be determined. However," he paused, and Thor sensed a shift in the Dark Lord's demeanor, not friendliness, but a certain pragmatism. "Destroying you serves no purpose if you speak truth. And if you are truly from beyond this galaxy, the Emperor will wish to study the phenomenon of your arrival. It may represent knowledge valuable to the Empire." "I will not be studied like some specimen," Thor stated firmly. "Nor will I submit to imprisonment. But if this Emperor of yours commands knowledge of other realms and methods of traveling between them, then perhaps we might find common ground. I wish to return home, and you wish to understand how I arrived. These goals are not incompatible." Vader considered this. When he spoke again, there was something almost like respect in his mechanical voice, the acknowledgement one warrior gives another after combat has proven their worth. "You will accompany me to Coruscant," Vader said, and this time it was not quite a command. "You will meet with the Emperor and explain your presence. In exchange, the Empire's resources will be made available to investigate the means of your arrival and potential methods of return. You will not be imprisoned, but neither will you be permitted to freely wander the galaxy until the Emperor is satisfied you pose no threat to Imperial security. It was not ideal, but Thor recognized a reasonable compromise when he heard one. He'd negotiated treaties between Asgard and other realms before the key was knowing when to stand firm and when to accept acceptable terms. "I agree to these conditions," Thor said, "with the understanding that I remain a free agent and representative of Asgard. I will not swear fealty to your empire. I will not participate in actions I deem dishonorable, and I reserve the right to depart if I discover a means to do so. But I will hear what your emperor has to say, and I will cooperate in investigating my arrival here." "Acceptable," Vader replied after a moment. "The emperor values power and knowledge above blind obedience. Your strength and unique origin may prove more valuable than simple servitude." He gestured toward the damaged fortress. "My ship is undamaged. We will depart for Coruscant within the hour. I suggest you use that time to recover from our battle." Thor nodded, feeling the aches in his body that even Asgardian healing couldn't immediately erase. The fight had taken more out of him than he wanted to admit. Vader's Force lightning had done damage on a level beyond simple physical injury, and the constant combat had taxed even his godly stamina as he made his way around the lava river toward the fortress. Using Mjolnir's flight to cross the more treacherous sections, Thor reflected on what he'd learned. This galaxy, for he now understood that was where he was, an entirely different galaxy from the one containing Midgard, and the other realms operated on different principles than what he knew. This force that Vader commanded was similar to Asgardian magic in some ways, but fundamentally different in others. The technology here was strange, with energy weapons and starships that seemed to operate on principles unlike anything in the Nine Realms. And Vader himself was a mystery. Thor had faced many warriors in his long life, but few with the combination of power, skill, and tactical thinking the Dark Lord possessed. There was pain in Vader too. Thor had sensed it during their closest moments of combat, when their powers pressed against each other and guards were briefly lowered. Whatever had made Vader into the armor-clad figure before him, it had involved tremendous suffering. The fortress's interior was in shambles where their battle had raged through it. Stormtroopers Thor now knew the term for the white-armored soldiers worked to clear rubble and restore systems. They gave him wary looks but didn't challenge his presence, having apparently received orders from Vader. Thor found a chamber that appeared to be some kind of medical bay and used the time to inspect his injuries. The damage was mostly superficial cuts, burns, and bruises that would heal. The deeper concern was the lingering sensation from Vader's Force lightning, which seemed to have affected him on a level beyond the physical. It felt like spiritual exhaustion, as if his very essence had been assaulted. He sat heavily on a medical bed, Mjolnir resting across his knees, and allowed himself a moment of uncertainty. Asgard felt impossibly distant, not in space, but in some more fundamental way. The Bifrost connection was completely absent, and Thor had no idea if Heimdall could even see him in this strange galaxy. His father would be worried, his friends would wonder what had happened, but Thor Odinson had faced impossible situations before. He'd been cast out of Asgard and stripped of his powers, yet had reclaimed them through growth and sacrifice. He'd fought alongside mortals on Midgard and learned humility. He'd faced down the Destroyer and stood against his own brother when Loki threatened the realms. This was simply another trial, another challenge to overcome. And as he'd told countless enemies over the centuries, Thor, son of Odin, did not yield. When Vader came to collect him an hour later, Thor stood ready. His armor had been cleaned as best he could manage, though the scorch marks and battle damage remained. His cape was ruined beyond repair, but he'd discarded it. He'd fought without capes before. Mjolnir hung at his side, ready as always. "The shuttle awaits," Vader said simply, Gesturing toward the hangar, Thor followed, and, together, uneasy allies born of pragmatic stalemate, they walked through the fortress corridors toward whatever destiny awaited on this Coruscant. The explosion sent both warriors flying in opposite directions. Thor crashed into the far bank of the lava river, his impact creating a crater that immediately began filling with molten rock. Vader was hurled back into his fortress, smashing through the balcony railing and coming to rest amid the wreckage of what had once been his personal quarters. For a moment, there was silence save for the ever-present roar of Mustafar's volcanic fury and the hiss of Vader's respirator. Smoke rose from both impact sites. The lava river churned, agitated by the energies that had been released above it. Thor rose first. His armor was scorched black in places, the cape reduced to tattered remnants. Blood ran from a cut above his eye, and his movements were slower than before, not injured precisely, but feeling the accumulation of damage even his Asgardian physiology couldn't instantly heal. He climbed from the crater, boots crunching on cooling volcanic glass, and looked across the river to where Vader's fortress loomed. This battle could continue. Thor knew he had the strength to press the attack, to bring this fortress down around the Dark Lord's ears if necessary. But something gave him pause, a warrior's intuition honed over 15 centuries of combat. Vader wasn't his true enemy. This empire the Dark Lord served might be tyrannical, but Thor had arrived uninvited on their world, had defeated their guards, had damaged their fortress. From a certain perspective, Vader's response had been entirely justified. Thor had dealt with enough diplomatic incidents between the Nine Realms to recognize when pride and duty were driving a conflict more than actual enmity. More importantly, continuing this battle served no purpose. Thor needed information where he was, how to return to Asgard, what had happened to the Bifrost. Killing or defeating Vader wouldn't provide those answers. It would only make enemies of an empire whose resources and knowledge he might need. Across the lava river, Vader emerged from the wreckage of his quarters. His armor was dented, his cape torn, and sparks flickered from damaged systems in his life support. But he stood with undiminished presence, lightsaber reigniting in his hand. The Dark Lord assessed Thor with those emotionless red lenses, and Thor sensed the same calculation occurring in his opponent's mind. They had fought to a stalemate. Neither could easily overcome the other. Continuing would only result in further destruction and potentially the death of one or both, an outcome that served neither of their interests. "Enough," Thor called across the distance, his voice carrying over the lava's roar. He lowered Mjolnir, not setting it aside, but taking it out of an active attack position. "This battle proves nothing except that we are evenly matched. I did not come to your world seeking conflict, Lord Vader. I came by accident, and I wish only to understand where I am and how I might return home." Vader didn't lower his lightsaber immediately. The red blade hummed in his grip, ready to continue the fight if Thor showed any sign of treachery. But after a long moment, he deactivated it with a snap hiss that seemed to echo with finality. "Your power is considerable," Vader admitted, the mechanical distortion of his voice making it impossible to read emotion, but the words themselves carrying weight. "You withstood force lightning that has killed Jedi Masters. You matched me in combat, something few in this galaxy can claim. You are either what you say you are, or the most sophisticated deception I have encountered." "I am Thor, son of Odin," Thor repeated, this time without the challenge in his tone. "In my realm, I am known as the God of Thunder. Though I understand such claims might seem strange to you, I wield Mjolnir, forged in the heart of a dying star and enchanted by my father to answer only to the worthy. I protect the 9 realms from threats both external and internal, and I find myself far from home, in a place I do not recognize, facing warriors and powers I have never encountered." Vader was silent, his mechanical breathing the only sound from his side of the river. Thor could sense the Dark Lord thinking, processing, evaluating. Finally, Vader spoke. "You claim to be from another realm entirely, not another planet or system within this galaxy, but something beyond it. Such claims border on impossibility, yet you demonstrate abilities inconsistent with any known Force tradition. You possess no midi-chlorian presence that I can sense, yet you command lightning as if it were an extension of your will. You wield a weapon that resists Force manipulation through unknown means, and you arrived here through no hyperspace lane or known method of travel. Then you believe me?" Thor asked, not quite allowing hope to enter his voice, but feeling a glimmer of it nonetheless. "I believe you are an anomaly that requires explanation," Vader corrected. "Whether that explanation aligns with your claims remains to be determined. However," he paused, and Thor sensed a shift in the Dark Lord's demeanor, not friendliness, but a certain pragmatism. "Destroying you serves no purpose if you speak truth. And if you are truly from beyond this galaxy, the Emperor will wish to study the phenomenon of your arrival. It may represent knowledge valuable to the Empire." "I will not be studied like some specimen," Thor stated firmly. "Nor will I submit to imprisonment. But if this Emperor of yours commands knowledge of other realms and methods of traveling between them, then perhaps we might find common ground. I wish to return home, and you wish to understand how I arrived. These goals are not incompatible." Vader considered this. When he spoke again, there was something almost like respect in his mechanical voice, the acknowledgement one warrior gives another after combat has proven their worth. "You will accompany me to Coruscant," Vader said, and this time it was not quite a command. "You will meet with the Emperor and explain your presence. In exchange, the Empire's resources will be made available to investigate the means of your arrival and potential methods of return. You will not be imprisoned, but neither will you be permitted to freely wander the galaxy until the Emperor is satisfied you pose no threat to Imperial security." It was not ideal, but Thor recognized a reasonable compromise when he heard one. He'd negotiated treaties between Asgard and other realms before the key was knowing when to stand firm and when to accept acceptable terms. "I agree to these conditions," Thor said, "with the understanding that I remain a free agent and representative of Asgard. I will not swear fealty to your empire. I will not participate in actions I deem dishonorable, and I reserve the right to depart if I discover a means to do so. But I will hear what your Emperor has to say, and I will cooperate in investigating my arrival here." "Acceptable," Vader replied after a moment. "The Emperor values power and knowledge above blind obedience. Your strength and unique origin may prove more valuable than simple servitude." He gestured toward the damaged fortress. "My ship is undamaged. We will depart for Coruscant within the hour. I suggest you use that time to recover from our battle." Thor nodded, feeling the aches in his body that even Asgardian healing couldn't immediately erase. The fight had taken more out of him than he wanted to admit. Vader's Force lightning had done damage on a level beyond simple physical injury, and the constant combat had taxed even his godly stamina as he made his way around the lava river toward the fortress. Using Mjolnir's flight to cross the more treacherous sections, Thor reflected on what he'd learned. This galaxy, for he now understood that was where he was, an entirely different galaxy from the one containing Midgard, and the other realms operated on different principles than what he knew. This force that Vader commanded was similar to Asgardian magic in some ways, but fundamentally different in others. The technology here was strange, with energy weapons and starships that seemed to operate on principles unlike anything in the Nine Realms. And Vader himself was a mystery. Thor had faced many warriors in his long life, but few with the combination of power, skill, and tactical thinking the Dark Lord possessed. There was pain in Vader too. Thor had sensed it during their closest moments of combat, when their powers pressed against each other and guards were briefly lowered. Whatever had made Vader into the armor-clad figure before him, it had involved tremendous suffering. The fortress's interior was in shambles where their battle had raged through it. Stormtroopers Thor now knew the term for the white-armored soldiers worked to clear rubble and restore systems. They gave him wary looks but didn't challenge his presence, having apparently received orders from Vader. Thor found a chamber that appeared to be some kind of medical bay and used the time to inspect his injuries. The damage was mostly superficial cuts, burns, and bruises that would heal. The deeper concern was the lingering sensation from Vader's Force lightning, which seemed to have affected him on a level beyond the physical. It felt like spiritual exhaustion, as if his very essence had been assaulted. He sat heavily on a medical bed, Mjolnir resting across his knees, and allowed himself a moment of uncertainty. Asgard felt impossibly distant, not in space, but in some more fundamental way. The Bifrost connection was completely absent, and Thor had no idea if Heimdall could even see him in this strange galaxy. His father would be worried. His friends would wonder what had happened, but Thor Odinson had faced impossible situations before. He'd been cast out of Asgard and stripped of his powers, yet had reclaimed them through growth and sacrifice. He'd fought alongside mortals on Midgard and learned humility. He'd faced down the Destroyer and stood against his own brother when Loki threatened the realms. This was simply another trial, another challenge to overcome. And as he'd told countless enemies over the centuries, Thor, son of Odin, did not yield. When Vader came to collect him an hour later, Thor stood ready. His armor had been cleaned as best he could manage, though the scorch marks and battle damage remained. His cape was ruined beyond repair, but he'd discarded it. He'd fought without capes before. Mjolnir hung at his side, ready as always. "The shuttle awaits," Vader said simply, gesturing toward the hangar. Thor followed, and together, uneasy allies born of pragmatic stalemate, they walked through the fortress corridors toward whatever destiny awaited on this Coruscant. The Imperial Palace dominated Coruscant's skyline like a dark monument to absolute power. It rose from the planet's surface in tiers of black stone and reflective metal, its architecture deliberately imposing, designed to awe and intimidate in equal measure. As Vader's shuttle descended toward the private landing platform, Thor noted the security measures with a warrior's eye. Energy shields, turbo laser batteries, patrol craft circling in precise patterns. This was a fortress that happened to be a palace, or perhaps a palace that had been built as a fortress from its foundation. The landing was smooth, and as the boarding ramp descended, Thor was met with a sight that drove home just how far from Asgard he truly was. Rows of Imperial guards lined the path to the palace entrance, warriors clad in crimson robes and armor, their faces hidden behind elaborate helmets. Force pikes held at attention. Beyond them stood officers in gray and black uniforms, bearing insignia Thor didn't recognize. And everywhere, the presence of that energy Vader called the Force hung heavy in the air, like the charge before a thunderstorm. "The Emperor expects us," Vader said, descending the ramp with mechanical precision. "You will address him as Your Majesty or my Lord Emperor. You will not approach him without permission. You will not touch your weapon unless directly threatened. The Imperial Guards are among the most elite warriors in the galaxy. Even you would find them challenging if forced to fight them all." Thor bristled at the instructions, but recognized the practicality in them. He was in foreign territory, outnumbered, and seeking these people's help to return home. Diplomatic courtesy cost him nothing, even if his pride chafed at the implied submission. They walked through corridors of polished stone and precious metals, past windows that offered breathtaking views of Coruscant's endless cityscape. Servants and officials scattered before Vader's approach, their fear palpable even to Thor's limited senses. The Dark Lord was clearly a figure of terror in this empire, someone whose presence alone commanded absolute obedience. Finally, they reached a set of massive doors inscribed with symbols Thor didn't recognize. The Imperial guards flanking the entrance moved in perfect synchronization, opening the doors to reveal the throne room beyond. The chamber was circular and dimly lit, its walls lined with more crimson-clad guards, but Thor's attention was immediately drawn to the figure seated on the raised throne at the room's center. He was humanoid, aged, his face deeply lined and pale as death. He wore dark robes that seemed to drink in what little light existed in the room, but it was his eyes that captured Thor's attention, yellow and burning, with an intensity that spoke of power beyond anything Thor had sensed from Vader. This was the Emperor, and the dark side of the Force radiated from him like heat from a sun. "Lord Vader," the Emperor said, his voice soft but carrying perfectly through the chamber's acoustics. It was a grandfatherly voice, almost gentle, but Thor heard the danger lurking beneath it, like a blade hidden in silk. "You return from Mustafar with interesting company. This must be the anomaly you reported." Vader knelt, his mechanical breathing echoing in the silent chamber. "Yes, my master. He calls himself Thor, claims to be from beyond this galaxy entirely. He arrived through unknown means and possesses abilities unlike any Force tradition. We fought to a stalemate before reaching an accord. A stalemate." The Emperor's yellow eyes fixed on Thor with an intensity that felt like being examined by some vast, predatory intelligence. "You must be formidable indeed if Lord Vader could not overcome you. Tell me, Thor of Asgard, what brings you to my empire?" Thor met that burning gaze without flinching. He'd stood before Odin in the All-Father's rage, had faced Hela's madness and Thanos' calculated cruelty. He would not be cowed by another monarch, regardless of their power. "Accident, Your Majesty," Thor replied, keeping his tone respectful, but not servile. "The Bifrost, a bridge between the realms of my home, was damaged in battle. When I attempted to use it, something went wrong. I was thrown through what I now understand was some kind of dimensional rift emerging on Mustafar. I seek only to understand what happened and find a way to return home." The Emperor rose from his throne with surprising grace for one so aged. He descended the steps slowly, leaning on a cane, but moving with the deliberate precision of someone who was far more capable than their appearance suggested. As he approached, Thor felt the dark side's presence intensify, pressing against him like physical weight. "Beyond this galaxy," the Emperor mused, circling Thor like a predator examining prey. "An intriguing claim. Tell me, how does one prove they are from another reality entirely? For all I know, you could be a Force user employing techniques to hide your presence, a rebel weapon designed to infiltrate the Empire, or simply a very convincing liar." "I offer no proof beyond my word and my actions," Thor stated. "I wield Mjolnir, a weapon forged by methods unknown in your galaxy. I command lightning through inherent ability rather than through this force of yours. I possess strength and durability far beyond what your people seem capable of naturally, and I arrived on Mustafar with no ship, no hyperspace signature, and no explanation save the one I've provided." The Emperor stopped directly in front of Thor, tilting his head as if listening to something only he could hear. "Curious. Lord Vader reports you have no midichlorian presence, yet you resisted force lightning that should have killed you. You withstood telekinetic pressure that crushes durasteel. You fought the Empire's greatest warrior to exhaustion. Those yellow eyes bored into Thor's own. Either you are what you claim, or you represent a threat beyond anything the rebellion has yet produced. I am no threat to your empire, Thor said carefully. I seek no conquest here, no political power, no involvement in your conflicts. I wish only to return to my home and my people. If you can help me do that, I will depart in peace. If you cannot, I will find another way, but I will not raise my hand against your empire unless forced to defend myself. Pretty words, the Emperor replied, his voice taking on an edge. But words are wind, as the saying goes. Actions reveal truth. He gestured with one withered hand. Kneel before your Emperor, Thor of Asgard. Demonstrate that you understand your position here alone, far from home, surrounded by powers you don't comprehend. Kneel, and perhaps we can discuss the terms of your cooperation. Thor felt every eye in the room upon him. The Imperial guards shifted slightly, ready to act. Vader remained kneeling, his mechanical breathing steady but somehow expectant. The Emperor watched with those burning yellow eyes, waiting to see if this outsider would submit or rebel. And Thor made his choice. No, the word hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Thor stood straight, Mjolnir at his side, meeting the Emperor's gaze without wavering. I am Thor Odinson, Prince of Asgard, and I kneel before none save my father the All-Father. I have shown you respect through courtesy and honest words. I will cooperate as a free agent and ally if you offer the same in return. But I will not grovel before any throne, no matter how powerful its occupant. For a long moment, silence reigned in the throne room. Then the Emperor began to laugh, a dry, rasping sound that held no humor, only dark amusement. Magnificent, he said softly. Lord Vader, you were correct. This one is no mere anomaly. He has spirit. The Emperor's smile was like a crack in a death mask. Very well, Prince Thor, you will not kneel, but understand this. You exist in my empire, at my sufferance. I permit your freedom because I am curious about your origin and because your power might prove useful. Cross me, threaten my order, or prove to be more trouble than you're worth. Lightning crackled between the Emperor's fingers, purple, white, and seething with malice. And I will show you what true power looks like. Thor's hand tightened on Mjolnir, but he didn't raise the hammer. A fair warning, Your Majesty. I offer the same. I will defend myself if attacked, and I suspect you would find me more difficult to destroy than you anticipate. But I prefer alliance to enmity. Tell me what you know of dimensional rifts, of travel between realities, of anything that might help me return home. In exchange, I will share what I know of the realms beyond your galaxy. The Emperor's eyes gleamed with predatory interest. Knowledge for knowledge, an acceptable trade. He turned and walked back toward his throne, his cane tapping against the polished floor. Lord Vader, you will escort our guest to suitable quarters. Provide him with access to the Imperial archives, the unrestricted sections. I want every sensor record from Mustafar analyzed, every energy reading from his arrival examined. If there is a dimensional rift, I want to understand it. If there are other realities beyond this one. He settled back onto his throne, and his smile widened. Then, I want to know how to reach them. Thor felt ice in his gut, despite the diplomatic success. He'd just given the most powerful tyrant in this galaxy a potential path to other dimensions, other realities. If this Emperor gained the ability to travel between universes, what would stop him from attempting to conquer them as he'd conquered his own galaxy? But the alternative was refusing cooperation and becoming an enemy of an entire galactic empire while stranded far from home. Sometimes there were no good choices, only varying degrees of acceptable risk. "I will cooperate," Thor said, "but I will not help you build weapons or methods of conquest. If I determine that my knowledge is being used to threaten innocent people in this galaxy or any other, our accord ends immediately." "Your terms are noted," the Emperor replied, waving one hand dismissively. "Now go. I have an empire to rule, and you have research to conduct. We will speak again when either of us has something useful to report." Vader rose from his kneeling position and gestured for Thor to follow. As they left the throne room, Thor couldn't shake the feeling that he just walked into a trap far more subtle than any physical battle. The Emperor's interest in dimensional travel, his hunger for knowledge and power, these were dangerous things to feed, even inadvertently. But Thor was committed now. He would use the Empire's resources to find a way home, and he would do everything in his power to ensure that what he shared couldn't be weaponized against innocent people. It was a narrow path to walk, but Thor had walked narrow paths before. As they moved through the palace corridors, Vader spoke quietly. "You impressed him. That is rare. Most who refuse the Emperor's commands are dead within seconds." "I take it you didn't refuse when he asked you to kneel," Thor observed. Vader was silent for several steps. When he spoke, his mechanical voice carried something that might have been regret. "I made my choice long ago. The consequences are mine to bear. You still have choices, Thor of Asgard. Make them wisely. The Emperor's favor is a dangerous gift, and his interest is more dangerous still." Thor filed that warning away. Vader, for all his darkness and service to a tyrant, seemed to be offering genuine advice. Perhaps there was more to the Dark Lord than simple villainy. Perhaps, like Thor himself, Vader was trapped by circumstances and choices that couldn't easily be undone. The quarters Vader led him to were spacious and well-appointed, with a viewport offering a stunning view of Coruscant's illuminated cityscape. There was a terminal for accessing the Imperial archives, a fully stocked refreshment area, and even what appeared to be training equipment. It was a gilded cage, comfortable but still a cage. "The archives are available to you," Vader said from the doorway. "I will return in 6 standard hours to escort you to the research laboratories where our scientists will begin analyzing the sensor data from your arrival. Until then, consider yourself a guest of the Empire, free to move within this wing of the palace, but advised to go no further without escort." "Understood," Thor replied. "And Vader, thank you for not killing me when you had the chance and for whatever advice you just offered. I recognize honor when I see it, even in unexpected places." Vader's red lenses regarded him for a long moment. "Honor is a luxury the dark side does not often permit. But perhaps," he trailed off, then continued in a different tone, "rest, regain your strength. The Emperor's plans for you are just beginning, and you will need all your power for what comes next." Then the Dark Lord was gone, the door hissing shut behind him, and Thor was alone with his thoughts and a terminal full of information about a galaxy far from home. Thor spent the next 3 days immersed in the Imperial archives, and what he learned both fascinated and disturbed him. The galaxy's history was long and bloody, thousands of years of conflict between Jedi and Sith, between Republic and Separatist, between various factions, all seeking power or simply survival. The Clone Wars alone had claimed billions of lives across countless worlds, and the Empire's rise had been built on the ashes of democratic institutions that had failed under the weight of corruption and bureaucracy. But he also learned about the Empire's methods. Entire species enslaved for labor, planets stripped of resources to fuel the war machine, descent crushed with overwhelming force. The destruction of Alderaan, an entire world, obliterated by a weapon called the Death Star, simply to demonstrate the Empire's power. Thor had seen conquest before, had watched Asgard impose its will on other realms, but this was something different. This was tyranny refined to an art form, and yet the archives also showed him the chaos that had preceded the Empire. The Republic's final years had been marked by paralysis and infighting, unable to respond to crises, corrupted by corporate interests and political manipulation. The Clone Wars had been orchestrated by Palpatine himself, the Emperor playing both sides to engineer exactly the situation that would allow him to seize absolute power. It was brilliant and monstrous in equal measure. On the fourth day, Vader came to collect him for the research session. The laboratories were located deep within the palace, guarded even more heavily than the throne room. Scientists in white coats worked at stations filled with technology Thor didn't recognize, analyzing data streams and holographic projections that floated in midair like sorcerers' illusions. Prince Thor, one of the scientists, greeted him with barely concealed nervousness. "I am Chief Scientist Threll Oven. We've been analyzing the sensor data from your arrival on Mustafar, and the results are unprecedented." Holographic displays materialized around them, showing energy readings and dimensional analysis that meant little to Thor but clearly excited the scientists. Oven manipulated the displays with practiced gestures, zooming in on particular data points. "The energy signature at the moment of your arrival was unlike anything in our database," Oven explained. "It wasn't hyperspace, wasn't any known form of force phenomenon, and the dimensional readings suggest you literally tore through the fabric of space-time itself. What's more interesting is the residual energy still clinging to your weapon and person. It's slowly dissipating, but we've managed to capture enough for analysis." Thor looked at the readings surrounding Mjolnir's holographic representation. "Can you use this energy to send me back?" "Possibly," Oven admitted, "but it would require tremendous power and extremely precise calculations. The energy field we're detecting appears to be multi-dimensional in nature. It exists simultaneously in this universe and whatever reality you originated from. If we could amplify it and stabilize a corridor between the 2 points," he shook his head, "it's theoretical at this stage. We'd need months of research, possibly years, and resources that even the Empire would find challenging to allocate." "The Emperor has authorized unlimited resources for this project," Vader interjected. "Time is the primary constraint. Continue your work, Chief Scientist. I will ensure you have everything required." As the scientists returned to their work, Vader gestured for Thor to follow him to a more private area of the laboratory. When they were alone, the Dark Lord spoke quietly. "The Emperor believes your arrival represents an opportunity. If dimensional travel can be achieved, it would give the Empire access to unlimited resources, new territories beyond any rival's reach. He will fund this research, regardless of the cost, but not purely for your benefit. You understand this?" "I assumed as much," Thor replied grimly. "I've given a tyrant the keys to other realities, haven't I? In seeking to go home, I may have endangered countless other worlds." "Perhaps," Vader acknowledged. "Or perhaps you've given those other realities advance warning of a threat. The Emperor is powerful, but even he cannot conquer what he cannot reach, and dimensional travel, if achieved, would work in both directions. Your people could come here just as the Empire could go there." It was an interesting point. If Thor could return home, he could warn Asgard, warn all the 9 realms about this Empire and its Emperor. The Bifrost could be modified to reach this galaxy. Barriers could be erected, defenses prepared. What had seemed like a mistake might actually prove strategically valuable. "You sound like you're trying to convince me to continue helping," Thor observed. "I am pragmatic," Vader replied. "You will help because you wish to return home. The Emperor will benefit from the research, regardless of your motivations. But I would prefer that you do so with full understanding of the consequences rather than naive hope. Informed allies are more valuable than ignorant tools." Before Thor could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the laboratory. Scientists rushed to their stations, and holographic displays flickered to life, showing something. An energy reading, massive and growing, emanating from somewhere in Coruscant's lower levels. "What is that?" Thor demanded, moving to examine the displays. "Unknown energy signature," one of the scientists reported, hands flying over controls. "It's similar to the readings from your arrival, but not identical. Something's opening a rift in the dimensional barrier. Something's trying to come through." Vader was already moving toward the exit. "Alert the Imperial Guard. Seal the sector. I want every available Force user converging on those coordinates." He glanced back at Thor. "You claimed to be from beyond this galaxy. It appears something else has followed you through, or your arrival has destabilized the barriers between realities. Either way, we must investigate." Thor grabbed Mjolnir and followed without hesitation. If something from beyond was emerging into this galaxy, he needed to know what it was. And if his arrival had somehow caused this, then it was his responsibility to deal with the consequences. They raced through the palace corridors, Vader's cape billowing behind him as he moved with force-enhanced speed. Thor kept pace easily, Mjolnir lending him flight when stairs or obstacles threatened to slow him. Behind them, Imperial Guards and stormtroopers mobilized with impressive efficiency, converging on the coordinates the scientists had provided. The rift had opened in Coruscant's industrial district, a region of factories and power plants that operated endlessly to feed the planet city's massive energy requirements. When Thor and Vader arrived, they found a scene of chaos. Workers fled in terror from a tear in reality itself, a jagged wound in space that crackled with energy, similar to what Thor remembered from the damaged Bifrost. And through that tear, something was coming. It was massive, easily 20 meters tall, with armor of black metal and eyes that burned with furnace heat. Thor recognized it instantly, and his blood ran cold. A fire demon. One of Surtur's soldiers from Muspelheim, the realm of fire. Somehow, impossibly, it had followed Thor's path through the dimensional rift. The demon emerged fully into the factory district, and its first act was to reach toward a power plant and draw the energy directly into itself. The building's lights dimmed, then died, as the demon absorbed megawatts of power and grew brighter, hotter, more dangerous. "What manner of creature is that?" Vader demanded, his lightsaber already ignited. "A demon from Muspelheim," Thor replied, lightning beginning to crackle around him. "One of Surtur's servants, drawn to fire and destruction. It must have sensed the rift I created and followed the path here. By Odin's beard, it will burn this entire district to ash if we don't stop it." The demon spotted them and roared, a sound like steel being torn apart and mountains collapsing. It raised one massive fist wreathed in flames and brought it down toward the fleeing workers with terrible force. Thor was faster. He launched himself forward, Mjolnir leading, and intercepted the demon's fist with the hammer's head. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the district, shattering windows and cracking pavement. The demon staggered back, surprised to find resistance. "Asgardian," it rumbled in the language of fire, which Thor understood but suspected Vader did not. "You brought us through. You opened the path. Now Muspelheim will claim this realm as it claims all things through fire and ash. The only thing you'll claim is defeat." Thor shouted back in the same tongue, then switched to the common language Vader understood. "It's calling for others. If more demons come through that rift, they'll turn Coruscant into a burning wasteland. We must close it." Vader assessed the situation with a commander's instinct. "I will hold the creature. You close the rift." He extended both hands, and the force lashed out in a telekinetic grip that actually staggered the massive demon. "Go, now." Thor didn't waste time arguing. He rocketed toward the dimensional tear, which still hung in the air like a wound in reality. Through it, he could see Muspelheim's volcanic landscape, a realm he'd visited before, a place of eternal fire and demon hordes. And worse, he could see more demons gathering on the other side, drawn by the opening, preparing to pour through. He had to close it. But how? The Bifrost's magic was beyond his understanding. That was Heimdall's domain, or the Allfather's. Thor was a warrior, not a sorcerer. He knew how to break things, not mend them, unless... Thor raised Mjolnir and called lightning from the sky. It came in a pillar of white-blue fury, striking him and channeling through the hammer through his divine connection to storm and thunder. But instead of directing it at an enemy, he directed it at the rift itself, pouring raw energy into the dimensional tear with all his might. The effect was immediate and violent. The rift began to collapse, its edges flickering and destabilizing under the assault of Asgardian lightning. Reality itself seemed to scream as dimensions that were never meant to touch were forcibly separated. Through the closing gap, Thor heard the demons on the other side roar in frustration as their path to this galaxy was sealed. Behind him, Vader fought the fire demon with a combination of lightsaber skill and force power that was impressive to behold. The Dark Lord couldn't match the demon's physical strength, but he didn't need to. He used telekinesis to throw debris, force lightning to burn vulnerable areas, and his lightsaber to sever extremities with surgical precision. It was a masterclass in how a smaller, weaker opponent could overcome overwhelming force through skill and tactical thinking. The rift collapsed with a final surge of energy that threw Thor backward through the air. He caught himself with Mjolnir's flight and turned to see the fire demon now fully focused on Vader, its body burning white-hot with rage and stolen power plant energy. Thor dove back into the fight. Mjolnir struck the demon's back with the force of a falling mountain, cracking armor and driving the creature to one knee. Vader seized the opportunity, leaping forward with force-enhanced speed and driving his lightsaber through the demon's eye lens, the one vulnerable point in its armor. The fire demon thrashed, flames erupting from its wound, and then it began to collapse in on itself. Without Muspelheim's sustaining energies, without the constant renewal of fire that kept such creatures alive, it was dying. Within moments, it was nothing but slag and ash, a cooling corpse that would never threaten anyone again. Vader deactivated his lightsaber and turned to Thor. His armor was scorched and sparks flew from damaged systems, but he stood victorious. "Well fought. Your warning prevented catastrophe." If those creatures had emerged in force, he didn't need to finish the sentence. "The rift is closed," Thor said, landing beside the Dark Lord. "It should not reopen unless someone deliberately tears the dimensional barrier again. But Vader, this proves my origin. No deception could produce a fire demon from Muspelheim. Will the Emperor believe me now?" "He will have no choice," Vader replied, "and that may prove more dangerous for you than his skepticism ever was. Come, we must report this incident immediately. The Emperor will want to know everything about these demons and the realms they come from." As they made their way back through the devastated industrial district, Thor felt the weight of his situation pressing down on him. He'd closed the rift, But in doing so, he'd shown the Emperor that other realms existed, realms with creatures powerful enough to threaten even an empire that controlled millions of worlds. Palpatine would want to know more, would want to find ways to control such power or prevent such threats, and Thor would be his primary source of information about dangers the Emperor couldn't possibly understand. He'd escaped one battle only to find himself in the middle of a far more complicated war. The Emperor's throne room felt even more oppressive than before. Thor stood at its center, Vader at his side, while holographic recordings of the fire demon battle played on floating displays. Scientists, military officials, and dark-robed advisors watched in silent attention as the Emperor studied the footage with those burning yellow eyes. "Fascinating," Palpatine said softly, his withered fingers steepled before him. "A creature immune to conventional weapons, resistant to the Force, capable of absorbing energy and growing stronger. And you claim there are realms full of such beings, Prince Thor? Muspelheim is inhabited by fire demons." "Yes," Thor confirmed, "but they are bound to their realm by ancient magic. They cannot travel freely between worlds without something like the Bifrost or a dimensional rift. Under normal circumstances, they pose no threat to this galaxy." "Under normal circumstances," the Emperor repeated, his voice taking on an edge. "But circumstances changed the moment you arrived. You tore a hole in the dimensional barriers. You proved that travel between realities is possible. And now creatures from those realities can potentially reach my empire." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Prince Thor, what other threats exist in these 9 realms you spoke of? What other powers might follow you through?" Thor chose his words carefully. "The 9 realms contain many powerful beings and forces. Frost giants who can freeze entire planets, dark elves who wield reality-altering weapons, the Destroyer, a golem of Asgardian metal that can level cities, and those are merely the known threats. There are cosmic entities beyond the realms, beings of such power that even Asgard approaches them with caution." The Emperor's eyes gleamed with something that might have been hunger or fear, perhaps both. "And Asgard rules over all of this? Your father commands such powers?" "Odin All-Father maintains order among the 9 realms," Thor corrected. "Not through absolute dominion, but through strength, wisdom, and alliances built over millennia. The realms respect Asgard because we have proven ourselves protectors, not conquerors. A distinction without much difference," Palpatine observed. "But I understand the principle. Your father has built an empire through more subtle means than I employed. Perhaps I could learn from his methods." He stood, descending from his throne with deliberate steps. "Or perhaps your father could learn from mine. Tell me, what would happen if the Galactic Empire made contact with Asgard? If we opened diplomatic relations between our governments?" Thor felt ice in his veins. The idea of Palpatine and Odin communicating, of 2 galactic powers beginning to interact, was both terrifying and potentially valuable. That would depend on the terms of contact and the intentions behind it. Asgard values honor and protection of the innocent. If your empire demonstrated those same values, then perhaps we could find common ground, the Emperor finished. "But you doubt my sincerity, don't you, Prince Thor? You see me as a tyrant, my empire as oppressive. You've read the archives, learned of Alderaan, and the various harsh measures required to maintain order." He smiled that death's head smile. "You judge me as Odin might judge me and find me wanting. I judge actions, not intentions," Thor replied carefully. "And the actions I've seen suggest an empire built on fear rather than respect, on crushing dissent rather than addressing its causes. That is not how Asgard maintains order." Because Asgard has never faced anything like the scale of this galaxy, Palpatine countered, billions of species, trillions of beings, each with their own agendas and grievances. The Old Republic tried to rule through consensus and democracy, and it nearly destroyed galactic civilization. Sometimes, Prince Thor, harsh measures are the only measures that work. Vader stood silent throughout this exchange, but Thor sensed the Dark Lord's attention focused intensely on every word. This was more than political debate, it was a test, and Thor suspected that his answer would determine much about his future relationship with the Empire. Perhaps you're right, Thor admitted. Perhaps this galaxy requires methods that would not work in the Nine Realms. But I cannot endorse tyranny, regardless of its justifications. I can offer respect for your power, cooperation in my goal to return home, and neutrality in your conflicts with those who resist your rule. But I cannot and will not support actions I deem dishonorable. For a long moment, the Emperor simply stared at Thor with those yellow eyes. Then he laughed, that same dry, rasping sound devoid of genuine humor. Honesty. How refreshing. Very well, Prince Thor. You will remain neutral in our affairs, and we will assist in your return home. But know this, the rift you closed was not the only consequence of your arrival. My scientists report increased instability in the dimensional barriers throughout this sector. More rifts may open, more creatures from your realms may come through, and when they do, I expect you to deal with them as you dealt with the fire demon. That's acceptable, Thor agreed. Any threats from my reality are my responsibility. I will face them. Good. The Emperor turned back toward his throne, but paused mid-step. One more thing. The Rebel Alliance has become more active in recent weeks. They strike at Imperial facilities, recruit from our citizens, spread propaganda about freedom and justice. They are a nuisance, but a persistent one. His eyes fixed on Thor again. If you encounter them during your time in my empire, I trust you will remember who has helped you and who has not. Neutrality is one thing. Actively assisting my enemies would be unwise. It was a clear warning wrapped in diplomatic language. Thor nodded his understanding, though he made no promises. If the rebels proved to be genuine freedom fighters rather than terrorists, he would judge them on their own merits, not on the Emperor's characterization. The audience concluded, and Vader escorted Thor from the throne room. As they walked the palace corridors, the Dark Lord spoke quietly. You handled that well. The Emperor respects directness, even when the direct answer is not what he wishes to hear. But Thor... Vader paused, his mechanical breathing filling the silence. Be careful. The Emperor's interest in you and your realms is not purely defensive. He sees opportunity, new territories, new powers to command, new threats to eliminate before they can threaten his rule. If he finds a way to reach Asgard, he will attempt to either conquer it or destroy it. That is his nature. I know, Thor said grimly, which is why I must return home and warn my people before that happens. How long until the scientists believe they can open a controlled rift? Months, at minimum, Vader replied. Possibly a year or more. The energy requirements alone are staggering, and the calculations must be perfect, or you could end up anywhere in the multiverse or nowhere at all. You will need patience. Patience. Thor had never been particularly patient, especially when separated from his home and duty, but he had no choice. He would use this time to learn more about this galaxy, to prepare for whatever the Emperor might attempt, and to watch for opportunities to warn Asgard of the threat lurking in this distant reality. They were approaching Thor's quarters when alarms began blaring again, different from before, more urgent. Vader immediately turned toward a wall-mounted comm unit and activated it. "Report," he commanded. "Lord Vader, we have a situation," a voice responded, tight with urgency. "Rebel forces have attacked the Imperial Research Facility on Scarif. They're attempting to steal the Death Star plan's technical readouts that would allow them to find a weakness in the station. All available forces are being mobilized." Thor saw Vader's posture shift, becoming even more rigid. "I will depart immediately. Prepare my flagship." "Wait," Thor said. "This Death Star, that's the weapon that destroyed Alderaan, correct?" "It is the ultimate expression of Imperial power," Vader replied. "A battle station capable of destroying entire planets with a single shot. If the rebels obtain its technical specifications, they may discover a vulnerability that would allow them to destroy it." "Then you're going to stop them," Thor observed. "To protect a weapon that obliterates entire worlds full of innocent people." Vader turned to face him fully. "It is my duty. Whatever you think of the Empire's methods, the Death Star represents peace through superior firepower. Rebels who seek its destruction are enemies of order, or they're people fighting against a tyranny that would hold entire planets hostage," Thor countered. "I've remained neutral until now, Vader, but I cannot stand by while you defend a weapon of genocide." "Then what do you propose?" Vader asked, and there was something dangerous in his mechanical tone. "Will you fight me now? Help the rebels steal information that could help them destroy Imperial property and kill countless loyal soldiers?" Thor gripped Mjolnir, feeling the weight of impossible choice pressing down on him. He'd promised neutrality, but neutrality in the face of evil was itself a form of evil. The Death Star was wrong, fundamentally. Morally wrong in ways that transcended politics or strategy. If the rebels were fighting to destroy it, then perhaps they were in the right after all. "I'm coming with you to Scarif," Thor declared. "Not to help you, and not to help the rebels, but to see with my own eyes who is fighting for what cause. I've been in this galaxy less than a week, surrounded by Imperial propaganda and your Emperor's continue manipulations. Before I make any final decisions about who deserves my aid, I need to witness the truth of this conflict myself." Vader regarded him for a long moment. "If you come to Scarif, you will be in the middle of a battle. Rebel Alliance soldiers will not know you are neutral. They will see you standing beside Imperial forces and assume you are the enemy. You may be forced to defend yourself, forced to take sides whether you wish to or not. Then I will face that when it comes," Thor said firmly. "But I will not hide in comfortable quarters while a battle determines the fate of this galaxy. I am a warrior, Vader. It's time I saw what this war is truly about." A pause. Then, "Very well. But understand, if you interfere in Imperial operations, if you aid the rebels in any way, our accord ends. The Emperor's patience has limits, and even your power will not save you if you become his enemy." "Understood," Thor replied. "Now let's go to Scarif. Let's see who deserves to win this fight." The journey to Scarif through hyperspace gave Thor time to consider the impossibility of his situation. A week ago, he'd been in Asgard preparing for another mission to protect the Nine Realms. Now he was aboard an Imperial Star Destroyer, a ship so massive it could carry entire armies, traveling to a battlefield between forces he barely understood, allied with neither side, but bound by circumstance to witness their conflict. Vader's flagship was a monument to military efficiency and overwhelming power. Thousands of personnel operated in perfect synchronization, maintaining systems that could reduce planets to rubble or transport entire legions across the galaxy. The bridge was a cathedral of technology, with officers standing at attention in crisp gray uniforms, while viewports displayed the swirling blue tunnel of hyperspace. Thor stood beside Vader, watching the crew work. The Dark Lord commanded absolute obedience. Officers reported crisply, followed orders without question, and showed visible fear when Vader's attention focused on them. It was effective leadership through terror, and Thor found it distasteful even as he recognized its efficiency. "The Rebel fleet is smaller than our forces," Vader explained, gesturing to a tactical display. "But they're desperate, which makes them dangerous. They know the Death Star plans are on Scarif, stored in the Imperial security complex. If they manage to transmit those plans to their fleet before we stop them, they'll have what they need to attempt an attack on the station itself." "And if they succeed in destroying the Death Star?" Thor asked. "Would that truly be such a loss? A weapon that can obliterate worlds serves no honorable purpose. It serves to prevent wars before they begin," Vader countered. "The fear of annihilation keeps star systems in line, prevents the chaos that would otherwise erupt. You may find it distasteful, but it is effective. Fear is a poor foundation for peace," Thor replied. "It breeds resentment and eventually rebellion, as you're discovering. Perhaps if your empire inspired loyalty through justice rather than terror, you wouldn't need weapons like the Death Star." Vader turned his masked face toward Thor. "You speak like a Jedi." They too believed in idealistic notions of justice and peace through understanding. The Republic they served collapsed despite or because of those ideals. "Reality is not kind to idealists, Prince Thor." Before Thor could respond, an officer called out, "Exiting hyperspace in 30 seconds. All hands to battle stations." The blue tunnel collapsed into normal space, and Scarif appeared before them, a tropical planet with turquoise oceans and white sand beaches, currently surrounded by a maelstrom of ships and weapons fire. The Rebel fleet was smaller, as Vader had said, but they fought with desperate courage. X-Wing fighters danced between star destroyers, firing proton torpedoes at critical systems. Capital ships exchanged turbo laser fire that lit up the void like artificial stars, and high above the planet, like a moon of death, hung the Death Star itself. Thor had seen the archives, read the technical specifications, understood intellectually what the station represented. But seeing it in reality, a construct the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons, powered by technology that could crack planets, drove home the true horror of it. This was the Empire's ultimate expression of power. This was what Palpatine had built to enforce his will. "The Rebel flagship is attempting to reach the communications tower," an officer reported. "They're trying to establish a transmission window to receive the plans from the surface. All ships concentrate fire on that vessel," Vader ordered. "Nothing gets through the blockade." The battle intensified. Star destroyers maneuvered with surprising grace for their size, bringing massive weapons to bear on Rebel capital ships that were outgunned but not outmaneuvered. Fighters swarmed like insects, engaged in dogfights that left debris trails across the starfield. Thor watched it all from the bridge, and something in him stirred. He'd fought in countless battles, defended Asgard from invasion, stood on walls while enemies crashed against them like waves. But this felt different. This wasn't raiders seeking plunder or ancient enemies continuing age-old conflicts. This was people, ordinary people, he sensed, not superhuman warriors or divine beings throwing themselves against impossible odds because they believed in something greater than survival. "The rebels are punching through the planetary shield," another officer called out. "Surface forces report they've stolen the plans from the archive tower. They're attempting to transmit them now." Vader's mechanical breathing quickened the only sign of urgency Thor had heard from him. "I will go to the surface personally, prepare my shuttle and an assault team. Those plans must not leave Scarif." "I'm coming with you," Thor stated, not quite making it a question. Vader paused, then nodded. "Very well, but remember your neutrality, Prince Thor." What you witness on Scarif may challenge it. The descent through the planetary shield was turbulent, with the shuttle rocking from weapons, fire, and debris impacts. When they landed in the security complex, the facility was in chaos. Alarms blared, fires burned from rebel bombing runs, and Imperial forces were rushing to defend the communications tower, where the stolen plans were being prepared for transmission. Thor followed Vader through corridors filled with smoke and the sounds of battle. They encountered their first rebel soldiers near the tower entrance, ordinary humans in practical armor, carrying blaster rifles and fighting with the determination of those who knew they probably wouldn't survive. Vader didn't hesitate. His lightsaber carved through them with brutal efficiency, and the Force hurled bodies aside like toys. It was a massacre, efficient and merciless, and Thor felt his neutrality crumbling with each fallen rebel. They reached the communications room to find it heavily defended. Rebel soldiers had barricaded themselves inside, and they were frantically working to complete the transmission even as Imperial forces pounded on the doors. "Reach the entrance," Vader commanded, and stormtroopers moved forward with cutting equipment. Thor stepped forward, placing himself between Vader and the door. "Wait, move aside," Vader ordered, his mechanical voice dropping to a dangerous tone. "The plans must not be transmitted. These people are fighting to destroy a weapon that threatens their entire galaxy," Thor said, his hand tight on Mjolnir. "I've seen enough, Vader. I've watched your empire in action, seen what it does to maintain order, and I've realized that some orders are not worth maintaining." "You're making a mistake," Vader warned, his lightsaber humming between them. "The Emperor granted you protection. Alliance with his enemies will void that protection instantly." "Then void it," Thor declared, lightning beginning to crackle around his arms. "I am Thor Odinson, and I stand with those who fight against tyranny, not because they're perfect, not because they've earned my loyalty, but because what they fight against is fundamentally wrong. Your Death Star is an abomination. Your empire is built on fear and murder, and I will not stand by while you butcher these brave warriors." For a heartbeat, Thor thought Vader might attack. The Dark Lord stood motionless, red lenses fixed on Thor's face, lightsaber ready. The stormtroopers around them raised their weapons uncertainly, waiting for orders. Then Vader lowered his lightsaber slightly. "You realize what you've done? You've chosen death over safety, chosen idealism over pragmatism. The Emperor will hunt you. The full might of the Empire will be turned against you. For what? For rebels you don't know, fighting for a cause you barely understand? For principle," Thor replied simply. "Something I should have chosen the moment I learned of Alderaan. I've been trying to stay neutral, trying to avoid this galaxy's conflicts while seeking my own way home. But there is no neutral position when facing evil. You either stand against it or you enable it, and I choose to stand." Behind the barricaded door, the transmission completed. A green light flashed on the rebel equipment, and a cheer rose from the defenders who knew they'd succeeded even as they faced certain death. Vader's posture shifted, becoming purely combat ready. "Then you die here alongside them. A god reduced to ash defending rebels who cannot be saved. How disappointing. I've died before," Thor said, spinning Mjolnir to build momentum. "It didn't take. Now come, Dark Lord. Let's see if your Emperor taught you anything about fighting a god who's chosen his side." The corridor exploded into violence as Thor and Vader's second battle began, but this time, Thor fought not for himself, but for the rebels behind him, for a principle that transcended his desire to return home. Lightning met, Force lightning. Mjolnir clashed against lightsaber, and the God of Thunder made his stand on Scarif against the Empire's greatest warrior. The rebels used the distraction to evacuate, carrying the precious plans toward their ship. They saw Thor fighting Vader, saw impossible power meeting unstoppable force, and understood that somehow, impossibly, someone had chosen to fight for them. Above the planet, the rebel flagship received the transmission. The Death Star plans were secured, and though many would die on Scarif speeches, the hope of destroying the Empire's ultimate weapon survived. Thor didn't know if he'd ever make it home to Asgard. He'd just made an enemy of an entire galactic empire and its Dark Emperor. But as Mjolnir struck Vader's lightsaber with the sound of thunder, as lightning scorched Imperial armor and the Force pressed against divine will, Thor knew he'd made the right choice. Some battles had to be fought, regardless of the cost. Some lines had to be drawn, even by gods far from home. And Thor Odinson, Prince of Asgard, had finally drawn his. The battle between Thor and Vader tore through the Imperial security complex like a storm given physical form. They fought through corridors, demolishing walls and sending terrified personnel fleeing before the clash of powers that transcended normal combat. Thor's lightning carved blackened channels through metal, while Vader's force abilities hurled equipment and debris with lethal precision. But Thor wasn't fighting to kill, not yet. He was fighting to give the rebels time to escape, to hold the line long enough for those brave soldiers to reach their ship with the precious plans. Every second he kept Vader engaged was another second the rebellion gained. "You cannot win this," Vader declared, force pushing Thor through a wall into the hangar bay, where rebel ships were attempting desperate launches under heavy fire. "Even if you defeat me, the Empire will hunt you to every corner of this galaxy. There will be no peace for you, no safety, no way home." Thor recovered, launching himself back at Vader with Mjolnir leading. The hammer struck Vader's lightsaber in a shower of sparks, driving the Dark Lord backward. "I wasn't looking for safety. I was looking for the right side. And I found it." Their weapons locked again, and in that moment of straining against each other, Vader spoke quietly, almost too quietly for anyone else to hear over the sounds of battle and evacuation. "You remind me of someone I once knew. Someone who believed in honor and justice, who fought for principles rather than power. The galaxy destroyed him. It will destroy you too. Then let it try." Thor growled, breaking the bind and swinging Mjolnir in a devastating arc that Vader barely dodged. "But I'll stand for what's right until my last breath, which is more than you can say." Something changed in Vader's stance, a subtle shift that Thor's warrior instincts caught immediately. The Dark Lord wasn't committing fully anymore, wasn't pressing his advantage when opportunities appeared. It was as if part of him didn't truly want to win this fight, even as his duty and training drove him forward. The last rebel transport lifted off, engines screaming as it rose toward the embattled sky. Imperial fighters pursued, but X-Wings ran interference, buying precious seconds. Thor saw it clear the immediate danger zone and felt a surge of satisfaction. The plans were away. The rebellion had its chance. "It's done," Thor said, lowering Mjolnir slightly. "The plans are gone. Will you keep fighting me over a battle that's already been lost, or will you let me leave with my honor intact?" Vader stood amid the wreckage of the hangar, his armor scarred and smoking. His mechanical breathing labored from the exertion of battle. For a long moment, he simply stared at Thor with those inscrutable red lenses. "The Emperor will demand your death," Vader finally said. "I will be expected to hunt you, to bring you before him in chains, or not at all. Do you understand what you've chosen?" "Perfectly," Thor replied. "I chose to fight for people who needed a champion, even though it cost me everything. That's what heroes do, Vader. That's what you could have done if you'd made different choices." For just a moment so brief, Thor almost missed it. Vader's hand trembled on his lightsaber. Then the Dark Lord deactivated the blade with a snap hiss that sounded almost like resignation. "Go," Vader said quietly. "I will report that you escaped during the chaos of battle, that your powers made you impossible to contain without destroying the entire complex. The Emperor will not be pleased, but he will understand that some battles are not worth the cost." Thor was surprised enough that he hesitated. "You're letting me go? After everything?" "I am choosing my battles, as you have chosen yours," Vader replied, his mechanical voice carrying something that might have been respect. "You fought with honor, spared lives when you could have taken them, and chose principle over safety. Those are qualities I once valued before." He trailed off, then continued in a different tone. "The galaxy needs more beings like you, Thor of Asgard, not fewer. Even if you are now my enemy, you are an enemy I can respect. That is rare." Thor nodded slowly, understanding passing between two warriors who had found themselves on opposite sides of a conflict neither truly wanted. "Where will I go? I can't return to Coruscant, and I have no ship, no knowledge of this galaxy's safe harbors. The rebellion operates from hidden bases scattered throughout the Outer Rim," Vader said. "They will welcome a warrior of your caliber, especially one who stood against me to protect their soldiers. Seek them out, and Thor," the Dark Lord paused, "if you ever find your way home, tell your people what you learned here. Tell them that empires built on fear always fall eventually, no matter how powerful they seem. I would not wish the Emperor's attention on your 9 realms." It was as close to advice as Thor suspected Vader had given anyone in years. "I will. And Vader, there's still good in you. I sensed it during our fights, saw it in your hesitation. Whatever choices brought you to this darkness, they don't have to define you forever. Redemption is always possible, even for the fallen." Vader's only response was to turn away, cape swirling as he walked toward his damaged shuttle. But Thor thought he saw something in the Dark Lord's posture, a weight, perhaps slightly lightened, or a burden acknowledged rather than denied. Thor had no time to dwell on it. Imperial reinforcements were arriving, and he needed to leave before the situation deteriorated further. He took to the sky, Mjolnir pulling him up through Scarif's atmosphere at speeds that left sonic booms in his wake. Behind him, the battle continued, ships exploding, weapons firing, soldiers dying in a conflict that spanned the galaxy. But the plans had escaped. The rebellion had its chance to strike back at the Empire's ultimate weapon. And Thor, god of thunder from a realm beyond this galaxy, had chosen his side in a war that would determine the fate of trillions. Days later, Thor found himself in a rebel base on Yavin IV, a jungle moon that housed warriors preparing for a desperate assault on the Death Star itself. The rebels had been surprised by his arrival, suspicious of his claims, but the survivors from Scarif vouched for him, the warrior who fought Vader himself to buy them time, the god from beyond who chose to stand with them. General Jan Dodana studied the Death Star plans with grim determination, while pilots prepared for what many knew would be a suicide mission. Thor offered what help he could, his strength to move equipment, his lightning to charge power cells, his presence to inspire courage in those who would soon face impossible odds. "You didn't have to do this," one young pilot told him, barely more than a boy, with the earnest idealism of those who believed they could change the galaxy. "You could have stayed neutral, found your way home. Why risk everything for strangers?" Thor thought about Asgard, about the values his father had tried to instill in him over 1,500 years, about responsibility and duty, about standing against injustice regardless of personal cost, about being worthy of the power he wielded. "Because someone had to?" Thor replied simply. because there are some fights too important to avoid, some lines too clear to ignore. Your rebellion fights for freedom against tyranny. That's a cause worth bleeding for, even for a god far from home." The pilot smiled, the fierce, fragile smile of youth preparing for battle, and returned to his X-Wing. Thor watched the preparations continue, knowing that tomorrow or the next day, these brave warriors would launch their attack on the Death Star. Some would die. Many would die. But they fought anyway, because hope demanded it. Thor didn't know if he'd ever return to Asgard. The dimensional rift had closed, the Empire's research was now forbidden to him, and he was stranded in a galaxy where he'd made enemies of its most powerful faction. But he'd also found purpose. He'd found people worth protecting, a cause worth fighting for, and principles worth upholding. As the Yavin sun set through the jungle canopy, painting the base in gold and crimson, Thor raised Mjolnir toward the alien sky. Lightning crackled around the hammer, a promise and a threat to any who would threaten these rebels. The god of thunder had found his place in this galaxy far, far away. Not as a neutral observer or a temporary visitor, but as a champion of the rebellion. As a warrior who stood against darkness, even when darkness commanded legions and empires. And if Emperor Palpatine wanted to punish him for choosing the losing side, wanted to demonstrate what happened to those who defied imperial will, then let him come. Thor had faced frost giants and fire demons, dark elves and world-ending threats. One more tyrant, no matter how powerful, was just another challenge to overcome. The Force might bind this galaxy together, might connect all living things in its invisible web. But Thor answered to different powers, to Odin's will, to Asgardian honor, to the thunder and lightning that had been his companions for centuries. And in the coming battles against the Empire's might, the rebellion would learn what it meant to have a god fighting beside them. The story of how Thor Odinson came to fight alongside the Rebel Alliance spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Rebels whispered of the god who stood against Vader on Scarif, who channeled lightning from clear skies and wielded a hammer that no Force user could control. The Empire issued bounties and warnings, declaring him a terrorist and enemy of galactic peace. And somewhere in the Nine Realms, perhaps Heimdall's all-seeing eyes caught glimpses of Asgard's prince fighting in a galaxy beyond his reach, pride and concern warring in the Guardian's heart. Thor never made it to the Battle of Yavin. By the time the assault launched, he was halfway across the galaxy, drawing Imperial attention away from the rebel fleet. But he heard the news when it reached him, the Death Star destroyed, blown apart by a single proton torpedo in an impossible shot guided by the Force itself, the Empire's ultimate weapon reduced to debris. Hope, surviving against all odds. He would continue fighting for that hope, for these people who'd shown him what true courage looked like. And perhaps one day, when the war was won or lost, the dimensional barriers might thin again. Perhaps the Bifrost would repair itself, or the Force would open a path home. Until then, Thor had found his purpose in this strange galaxy. He was Thor Odinson, god of thunder, champion of the rebellion, and enemy of tyrants across all realities. Asgard had taught him to be a warrior, Midgard had taught him to be a hero, and this galaxy far, far away had taught him that some battles transcended realms, that justice was worth fighting for, even when home seemed impossibly distant. The Force might not flow through him, but thunder and lightning answered his call, and that would be enough.